Welcome to the Leaders and Their Stories podcast. I'm Richard Lowe, the writing king and the ghostwriting guru. Thank you for coming to the podcast. I'm here with Trevor, who's going to tell us all about his business and AI and how that can help you and how that can help a business and what to look out for and things like that. Trevor, why don't you give us a little short introduction?
Hey, Richard. Great to be here. Thank you for having me on the pod. My name is Trevor Sumner. I'm the CEO of IGenie, which is an AI company that's transforming consumer insights. Consumer insights, huge market, very dependent on survey-based data. It's increasingly unreliable data sets. Recently, there was like a $10 million fraud case, and there's a lot of human bias. So what we do is we synthesize trend spotting, brand equity tracking, product benchmarking, and innovation by synthesizing tens of billions of Google searches, views, social posts, videos on TikTok and Instagram for companies like Kenvue, Unilever, Coca-Cola, and the like. I've been a 25-year veteran of the tech space. So I've seen a couple different hype cycles and caught the first internet boom in 1998. Been through an IPO and started my own company, which I grew to over 100 people. So also an angel investor, advisor to startups. So been around the block.
I've done a couple things then, a couple minor things.
I'm older than my baby face kind of pretends.
Yeah, your persona here is good. All right. So AI is the big thing now, and obviously you're working with AI a lot. Now you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, and I think we're actually still going up to the peak and about to hit the fall. Because basically the hype cycle, for those who don't know, is you have your products. So AI came out, everybody's all excited about it. They start investing and goes up, 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 up. And then it doesn't meet the expectations or whatever happens, and it just crashes. Investment we're talking about. And then it goes down to almost nothing, and then it pops back up to a new normal, which is then becomes the normal. And you saw it with cloud, you saw it with all kinds of different things, technologies. So I think we're still on the big spike, and we're about to hit the top of that. What do you think?
On the investment side of the house, I think there's certainly something there, right? In that some of the valuations that we're seeing out in the market are just crazy, right? Like pre-revenue companies, like there's a robotics company that's pre-revenue that was valued at $40 billion, right? Pre-revenue. I'm seeing a lot of AI disruptors who have a couple million in revenue and are raising money at 250 million, like, 50, 100x revenues. So on one hand, I think like that is definitely a hype cycle. I'm a little more of an East Coast cultural investor, right? Where I look at real, kind of economics and multiples. At the same time, we're seeing some companies really have exit velocities that are unlike anything that we've seen before. Companies that are 30 people and driving $100 million in revenue and being able to build that in 3-4 years. There's definitely something to a new growth trajectory around software and product-led growth with self-serve models that end up going into the enterprise that seems to be working. So the disruption is real. And then the other thing I would say is, remember, kind of when I caught the first internet boom and, everybody rebranded, IBM all of a sudden became IBM.com. We've changed everything, right? Like, you haven't. We invested, but nobody was really spending, had moved all their spend to e-commerce and not all of media had moved to the internet. People still had cable TV. And what's different, I think, about this is a lot of people are using AI, whether it's Perplexity for search or ChatGPT. Marketing teams are getting cut and using creative tools for blogging, for image generation. My designer uses AI-based image generation tools. It's just, we can do a lot more right now. And I think that productivity is very real. Now, whether the hype that it's going to change the entire world and, cut budgets by 80% tomorrow, like that's a little overblown. But the amount of usage I find to be very real.
Well, I know that I'm on ChatGPT all day long. And I stick with ChatGPT because that's what I know, and I don't really have the time to learn new things at this point. Sometimes I jump into new things, and the learning curves can be pretty high. But I'll get to them eventually. But I'm literally on ChatGPT all day long.
Yeah.
And I get my money out of that $20 a month.
100%, 100%. And, it gets to know you over time. I just did posted on LinkedIn. I asked it, a couple of personal questions about what it thought about me. And look, there's a lot of flattery there. But I also asked, where do you think my insecurities lie? What do you think of my management style? And then it was like, do you want to know what based on your management style, what some weaknesses and blind spots might be. And it nailed it. I mean, it really nailed it. That was just like a wonderful reminder of, some things that I should be looking out for as I approach big and new problems. And, for it to be to you, to the way you like answers, to the way you do work, to even create your own, GPTs for specific types of tasks. That's actually remarkably easy. And so I think everybody should be starting to use it right now to kind of build its capability personalized to you. And like you said, like I would say I've reduced 80% of my Google searches to Perplexity or ChatGPT at this point.
I did an experiment. So I went to my doctor and my doctor did the usual, this is a physical, usual 15-minute physical that was pretty lame, gave me some results. I took all the tests that I've done in the last year with the doctor. I took all my diet, exercise program, I do everything that I'm doing now in my life, put it in ChatGPT. Took me several hours. And then I said, okay, based on what you just learned, I want to extrapolate 25 years into the future. So if I keep doing what I'm doing, what happens? And it gave me a timeline. And it said, you have a heart attack this year's out, and you have this happen and this happen and this happen, probabilities. And then I said, okay, what do I need to change to prevent that outcome? And it said, of course, eat better and exercise. And I was amused because that's basically what I keep getting told. And it gave me why and wherefores and stuff to do and a plan and blah, blah, blah. And I'm starting to follow it even because it was far better than going to the doctor. I got real results and it actually listened.
Well, I think actually, some of the conclusions in this case might be obvious. It also can detect more nuanced things. But what I really loved about what you said was it created a plan.
Yes.
Right. And so this is the wonderful thing about ChatGPT is going from advice to action. So for example, when I started at IGenie, my background is in retail tech and marketing tech, but not a big background in consumer insights. Luckily, IGenie was founded by the head of consumer insights for Unilever and Coca-Cola, and the team's amazing, and they have real depth there. But I said, okay, let's say I want to become an expert in consumer insights in 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, put in whatever you want. Suggest a set of reading and exercises over the course of the next 60, 90, 120 days. To create a plan, tell me which books I should read, which blogs, kind of magazines or online blog sources. And it puts it all together week by week and creates a curriculum. So like that action plan customized to you is really exciting for personal development. And that could be your health. That could be, knowledge base. That could be, if you think about how it's going to transform learning for kids who are right now primarily using ChatGPT to cheat on their homework and not do the writing and et cetera, but could be used to actually enforce learning plans, see how well you're learning along the way, and adapt, right? And adapt that plan by like, oh, I missed this week, or I did this instead of that, readapt, kind of rework the plan from here. Or I took 2 weeks vacation and now, but I need to hit this new deadline, rework the plan so that, and it does all of that, right? And I think there's just a fear factor of using a lot of these tools, a fear factor that they're going to tell us what to do. And God forbid, create a difference in action. People hate the notion of change, but the action plans are tremendous.
Yeah, what I found is they tend to sometimes be overwhelming. So what I do is I say, okay, that plan looks good, but I can't do it based on what I've got going on in life. It's going to overwhelm me. And I says, oh, okay, thumbs it down. Okay, this is the essential one. This is optional. This is essential. Look at this. Don't bother with that. I told you that before, but it's not necessary. You basically get in a conversation with it. That's what's cool about it is you get in a conversation, you talk to it and you say, this is going on. This is what I need to fix. Can you help me with this? Oh, sure. Of course, it always says sure. And here's the answer. And then you say, well, that answer doesn't make sense to me. Okay. What am I missing? Oh, okay. Here's the answer. Well, that answer's a little bit better, but still it's a problem for me. You just keep going back and forth. Adjust that date to be 2 weeks instead of a week. Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually also good, bringing this back to business and thinking about strategy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take the strategy just out of the box. But for example, if you're doing competitive intelligence, I advise a company called Competitor Genius, where like they're using AI to, kind of basically allow you to map out your competitors, see how the reviews from clients on G2, Capterra, all the B2B type sites can provide some insights, but also to figure out how to do that in a structured way. I think that's also like, how we deal with like the unstructured output of Gen AI is like, and then measuring it month to month. If you're looking at an analysis of your website. You can put that into ChatGPT or Claude or these others and say, yeah, tell me what you think of this website. How do we make it better? What do I need to do to start attracting this audience versus that audience? What tweaks would you suggest? And it's phenomenal. The level of suggestions, detailed and granularity, is just impressive. So
I actually did that. My website and my LinkedIn profile. And now I'm working on my Facebook because my Facebook is a different market than LinkedIn.
yeah.
And it gave me some detail. I was amazed to find out it can actually tear apart graphics and didn't know it gotten that far. And it told me, well, this picture is fine, but it could use this and this and this. This banner looks good, but it needs this. And the background drowns out the text, and stuff like that. It was really neat not having to send that around to 50,000 people or whatever to look at and get their opinions. I'm not getting opinions here. It seems like more grounded information.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actionable and specific. You can
Yes.
say, like, hey, you should tweak this text to be more professional. Okay, great. With that in mind, please recommend some edits for this specific paragraph, and it'll give it to you.
Yep. Keeping in mind that you have to tell it, I don't want it to be robotic. I want it to be not take out the AI crap. I always tell it that. Put in active voice, all these you have to tune it. Otherwise, you're going to get AI crap.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, again, the paid plans, making sure it gets to know you, and some of the keys that you can put in is like, hey, the voice for this website is professional, but a little bit cheeky. It's, without being
Right.
silly, da, 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 da. We always, like Apple's guidelines, we never say mobile phone, it's always iPhone. We say these words, but never these words. We want to be helpful, but also want to be engaging and a little bit entertaining, like whatever those brand guidelines are. And you could even upload a brand presentation, right? And then it has that as its, kind of North Star for all future prompts. So you don't always have to put that in there, right? And so I think that's a little bit of the key about, just jumping in and using those things. And then, working with your teams. Like, I think the other thing is it's a little overwhelming because there's so many different areas right now where this can be applied. And as a leader, you've got to figure out how are the teams feeling comfortable about adopting this. Shopify, put out the Shopify CEO put out an amazing post on LinkedIn and beyond, just talking about how they're going to become an AI first company and how, everybody's kind of personal plan and, annual review will include, kind of how are they adopting AI tools? How are they pushing the organization forward on AI tools? Every new hire is going to be questioned based upon whether that can be automated through AI, and there are other approaches to it. And, it's an incredible world. I was talking to a lot of marketing people I know who are currently looking for work, and it's a terrible time to be looking for work because you've got a lot of professionals who've left Google and Facebook and Meta. So there are a lot of people working, like 1,000 people applying to jobs, on every post on LinkedIn, in part because they're using AI to personalize every message and every cover letter to submit to jobs. So there's a lot of that going on. And so I've had a couple of people ask me, and I was like, well, what do you think I should do, Trevor? And I was like, you know what I'd be looking for? I'd be looking for a marketing person saying, like, here's like the stack that you need, right? Like, so marketing is increasingly becoming a tech and IT function, right? So you want to run a podcast? Here's the podcast AIs that will clean up all the background noise in your audio, that'll cut it up into snippets, that'll prepare little images based upon, what's, kind of encapsulated in the snippets. And all of a sudden, I have a full content and marketing plan based upon an hour-long podcast such as this. And it does it, in 20 minutes for you to review as opposed to 10 hours of work. Okay, so that's podcasting. Here's the AI you need for blogging. Here's the AI you need for email outreach. Here's the AI I need for ads. Here's how they all work together. And I can put that together for you. Just tell me the stack, because I don't know the stack. A lot of the people who have marketing teams, everybody's kind of like a little bit siloed and they have their own AI stack, but it's like hard to figure out how they all work together. And some leadership about how to build that, I think, is what's missing for a lot of companies and marketing and other areas too. And it's hard to measure the progress of adoption there.
Well, AI is not that old. And what to me is the clue that AI is mature is when that stops being stressed, when it becomes just normal, much like the internet and having a mobile phone. I mean, nobody looks, are you mobile phone ready? When you're hiring somebody, it's normal now. And when AI gets to that point where it's normal, where IBM doesn't say we're AI, it's just, it better be AI. You don't have to say it. Then it becomes more mature. That's what the mature point for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that, but I also think, I would expect it to be a question of every interview,
Of course.
over the next year, and again, Shopify, also Klarna just recently announced this too as a fast following that, how do you use AI? But, in your job function, in your personal life, like that's, AI is not going to replace us. People who use AI better than you will replace you.
People who use AI as a digital assistant, as somebody, actually an electronic person to help them out, get their job done, and replace all those silly tasks that people have been doing in the past. Like I had a spreadsheet to fill out with 1,000 names. I just said, ChatGPT, help me fill this out. I said, well, what do you need? Here's a spreadsheet. I need the data filled in. I was really vague, and it said, okay, filled in. Half an hour. After to give it a couple more instructions, like, okay, that hours work.
Yeah.
That's the important point.
Yeah, and there's this like primordial struggle between those who say, if that is going to put a lot of people out of work versus that's going to make a lot of people more effective at their job and able to accomplish more and drive more revenues. And this is where you get, kind of very lean organizations getting to $100 million in revenue versus, hey, we're going to put 10 million truck drivers out of work. And the answers are probably a little bit of both. And anybody who tells you it's not going to put anybody out of business, we're all just going to be kind of higher level, higher order cells because of this, I think is being intentionally techno optimistic. And anybody who says it's just going to put everybody out of jobs is being techno pessimistic. And as always, the answer is usually somewhere in the middle.
Well, I've written 4 books on digital transformation, and all of them went into this, that the idea is AI and technology, and some of them are more robotics based, is not based around obsoleting people. It's based around making more efficient people.
Absolutely. And that's happened, the typewriter and the personal computer. We talked about how that was going to bring, all the secretaries and note takers and typists out of work. And the reality is it created millions of jobs. Or Instagram, right? Instagram as an app was going to put all professional photographers out of business. But what actually happened is, yes, on the kind of artistic, highly paid Annie Leibovitz type of photographers, there's a lot less of those. But we also created literally billions of people who now consume photography for 2 to 3 hours a day. Influencers. My wife is an influencer, right? And makes a tremendous amount of money doing kind of influencer marketing and helping clients produce a tremendous amount more of content that gets consumed. And so like you actually create the step change of consumption,
Yes.
which turns out like the photography industry in terms of revenue has never been higher, and it's probably 100x higher, right? And so, we have to figure out where are these like 100x growth opportunities that happen, but a lot of them are just kind of, you can't see it coming. It's a little bit unintended because you see these massive shifts in consumer behavior, professional behaviors, and things like that.
Well, in the writing industry, which is I'm in as a ghostwriter, the thing that's affecting me or affecting writers is it's cutting out the bottom of writers. So if you're an entry level writer, or you're a writer who's barely making a living, if you don't know AI, you're doomed. For higher level writers, it's the same thing. You better be using AI not to write, but as a tool to help speed up that writing cycle and make it better. You're stuck trying to think of the next thing to write about. You got writer's block. AI is great for that. Now, I got writer's block. Tell me how to get out of it. Simple prompt, and it will give you all kinds of suggestions, and it'll ask you, what's going on, and well, this and this and this and this, and you're out of writer's block. Writer's block is pretty common for writers. Do you know what usually causes it? Is just staring at the screen too long. It's
Yeah.
fixed. It's a fixed stare, and you get almost hypnotized. So you got to get out and go for a walk. Silly thing, silly, interesting answer. That's, in my case, I found that's usually the solution. Just go for a walk, take a break, get on the exercise bike. Probably too fat anyway because you're sitting on your butt writing all day. That's what I'm doing. I mean, for me.
Yeah, but I think that's an important point, right? Like, one of the things about Gen AI is it's going to output a tremendous amount of content. And the question is, like, how good is that content, right? The people with the kind of, if you look at the long tail of content, it's just going to explode out. But the high value at the head is going to be more and more important. And, I think it's just a hard challenge, right? Because especially for people just like early on in their career, because what's going to happen is the people who have the wisdom and the experience to know what great content is, 10x content is what Rand Fishkin would call it, right? Is like just content that's so much better than everything else out there, whether it's, outputting a ton of imagery, knowing what the best imagery is and how to get it just a little bit to that level and to that next level, entry level, you don't have the experience or wisdom to do that. And so I think a lot of these kind of transformations are very difficult for various different people, where you talk about like moving from coal miners and telling them they should become coders, which is obviously unrealistic. How do we deal with these kind of rapid changes? And for the current generations, we're going to need a lot less of like some of the grunt work, paralegaling, base copywriting. Those things are going to get wiped out. But those were the jobs where you got the experience to realize, oh, I provided this, and then there were these edits, and then it made it better. And then I saw the process to get from okay content to fantastic content. And without that wisdom and experience, like, how do you now bridge the gap now that your efforts are not needed for that entry level? And so how do you get from here to that, kind of wizardry status without that pathway? And I think there are, we talked about ways that, ChatGPT or others can build learning plans and get you there. But, how do you do that without a great deal of experience? That's something we have to solve.
I have an interesting statistic for you. According to the statistic that I found, what's the biggest coding language in the world that's used right now?
Well, now it's English.
Coding, well, no, it's not.
Or I would have said Excel.
COBOL runs all the financials companies, and it's worked forever. So it's embedded in everything. It's like 70%. It's a huge number. Well, what's happening to all the COBOL programmers? They're aging out. Who's going to fix all this code when the baby boomers retire? Nobody.
It's a couple things. So one, I would challenge, and I would say, if you think of natural language as a programming language, or Excel as a programming language, as increasingly it's becoming, in terms of daily usage and everywhere, like, I think that would explode out over COBOL. But this is also something Gen AI is really great at, which is migrating code. Right. So the big challenge with the COBOL, and why we still have COBOL, is it's just such a huge effort to migrate it over. And now Gen AI can do most of that. And so I think we have a real opportunity to sunset some of the legacy technologies that we were terrified of removing. So
it's millions and millions and millions and millions of lines of code. And I'm sure at the board level, they don't see it. They don't know that this is a problem. Nobody's told them that, oh my God, half of our stuff is written in COBOL. And if we don't fix this, we're not going to have anybody to support it.
I'd be surprised. I actually think, these days, the technology focus, especially in finance, is pretty deep. I think they know, they just don't know, like, when's the right time? How do you go about it? And how do you, what's the right way to go system by system and get there? And what's the plan? I think you're going to see in the background a lot of this transitioning going on. And there's some companies, I was trying to think, Klarna, I think, was one of them, where they didn't like, one of the systems either through Salesforce or Workday or something along those lines. So, because you highly customize these platforms, they cost, tens of millions of dollars a year to customize or even, kind of support. And they use Gen AI to basically rebuild the system using custom software and say, like, this is exactly what I want us to do. Here are the specs, and then they built it, and they don't have to pay the giant license fees, right? And so I don't know how realistic that is. You have to be a pretty big organization to be able to want to create your own custom CRM, et cetera. But the notion that these Gen AI tools can actually build that for you and remove the licensing fees, which are
it's got to be astronomical, yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, there's a lot of talk about SaaS is dead because of this, and how large scale companies are, Salesforce and Workday and the Oracles and SAP are going to be under significant amount of threats. Look, I think they're going to respond, but I think it's going to erode at their margins, and they're not going to be able to charge the same amounts that they are in the past. So we'll see.
Yeah, same here. I think SaaS is just fine. It's just going to evolve.
Right. I mean, again, taking the Instagram, it's like, oh, it's going to kill photographers, but it actually created all this new demand, right? From a marketing perspective, like, I never thought I needed podcast AI. I never thought I needed blog AI. I never thought I need sales outreach AI. And, all of a sudden, you kind of add these things up. I'm like, I need like 10 new marketing softwares just to run a modern marketing stack. So obviously it's creating a lot of new demand for tasks that I never really even thought of. And the question is that new demand gonna, is that like 20% of what I'm replacing? Is it 100%? So it's, apples to apples. Is it actually going to create twice the amount of spend or 10 times the amount of spend because I don't have to pay somebody to do that, or because I get 10 times the value out of it and I can get to $100 million in revenue with 30 people? And the answer is, we don't know.
Find out.
I think we're going to do a lot more with little. And I think you're going to see companies need less and less capital to get there, And then you get back to your original question, where are we in the hype cycle? Well, if I don't need to raise as much money to get to 100 million in revenue, what is the value of my company when I need to raise a couple $1 million? Maybe it's a lot more than the traditional multiples have indicated.
This AI and its related technologies actually solve a huge problem that humanity is having right now. I don't know how much awareness you have of it because most people don't. It's called demographics. The world is involved in a demographic collapse right now. In China, it's death. I mean, they're in a demographic collapse. They can't recover literally. Japan has been in a demographic collapse since for years and years and years. Russia, Germany, these countries are all collapsing. The United States is even feeling it because you need to have 2.1 children born per couple to keep at least even. Imagine that slicing and no, never mind. And America's at 1 point, US is at 1.6 right now.
Yeah.
Well, Japan is actually below, not Japan, China is actually below 1 and falling. And their numbers that they say they have 1.3 billion people. They probably more likely have more in like less than a billion, maybe even 700 million because they're not reporting their numbers right. Well, what Japan is doing is they're automating everything and they're using AI like crazy. So they're able to make up for we don't have people to run our country anymore because there's not enough young people. Let's automate. So they're becoming like masters at automation. And that solves one problem. The other problem, of course, is what do you do with all these people when you got an inverted demographic pyramid, which we've never had in human history before, where there's too many much more old people than there are young people. How do the young people support the old people anymore? That problem is a problem for the economists, but the technological problem of how do you run a country if your population is falling? AI and other technologies, especially robotics and things, can solve that problem.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there's so many problems outlined in that demographic shift. Elder care is a big one. I'm an investor in a company called Norbert Health, which kind of like from 3 feet away can take all your vitals, your blood pressure, your heart rate, your oxygenation, things like that. And what that helps is for geriatric care facilities to better help care for the health of people, but they're going to live longer. How do you deal with Alzheimer's? How do you deal with mental acuity? I think we're going to get more care there. So hopefully the costs will go down. But then, to your point, like, what do you do with the, kind of leadership and other things? And then like, what actually changes that from 1.6 to 2.1? I mean, one could argue that in this age of potential abundance, all the goods get cheaper because they're robotically produced and, you don't need truck drivers. So the cost of, trucking, delivery, logistics, falls through the floor. So everything gets cheaper. We don't need to spend 5 days a week working because there's just not that kind of amount of work to do. So, okay, well, what do you do now that it's cheaper to live? You have more time. Maybe the answer is you have children, right? And, one of the things in this country that you could argue is like, we made it really expensive and difficult to have children, right? Whether it's, the cost of schooling, the cost of childcare, the lack of tax credits for, the middle and lower classes. We could talk about policy and I don't want to get into politics, but we've made it really expensive and difficult to have children. But what if all this makes it very easy to have children, that you have more time and it's inexpensive? And then maybe we reverse the trend. All these dynamics have huge, profound effects, right? Especially 10, 20 years in the future. I think it's very easy to get caught in the trap of uncertainty and, oh my God, the sky is falling. When the reality is we're really bad at predicting these things. So you got two choices. It's like, I could just be a pessimist and say the world is falling apart and there's going to be nuclear winter and robot overlords, or, hey, it's going to be this like, utopian nirvana where, I can have as many kids as I want. I spend as much time with them and I don't have to do much work. And again, the answer is, probably somewhere in the middle. The question that you have control over is like, what's your mental state in the near term? And so like, I like to be an optimist. I just find it's a better way to go through life. And there are terrible things happening in this world, less of them than ever before, arguably by most metrics. So try and have be part of the future. The best way to predict the future is to create it. Work on things that are exciting, bringing new things into the future, adopt these things, really understand them, harness their potential, and hopefully, keep the worries away and keep your focus on the good things.
It's quite common now in the news. It's obviously taken advantage of by the political parties fighting each other and various other things going on. The algorithms.
Enragement is engagement.
Yes, of course. But when you look at it from a statistics point of view and from a rational point of view, I mean, you go back 200 years and There's no running water. There's no toilets. There's diseases everywhere. I mean, smallpox. If you ever look up smallpox on the internet, oh my Lord, that is not something you want. We eliminated it. And it was brutal. That elimination campaign was brutal. Wow, it's tough to read. Quarantine, not like the recent one we had, but these were involuntary quarantines and children being ripped from their parents and stuff. It's brutal. But they eliminated smallpox. You go back further, you got barbarian hordes coming over the mountains and wiping out your civilization. I mean, these are things that people worried about. We've got things to worry about, but especially here in the States, a lot of our problems are what I call first world problems. Oh my God, my cell phone's not working. I'm going to die. No, you're not going to die. You're not going to die without your cell phone for a couple of days.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we're much better off, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't be diligent about solving the world's problems and where there continues to be suffering. And yes, there's still a lot of it because there are a lot of us. But look at what Bill Gates has done with his life and how he's dedicated his life to solving things like toilets and malaria and things like that. And we have solutions there, and we can solve them in part because of the age of abundance and the fact that we've created such wealth from the accelerations that we've seen to date. And again, you can argue politically about concentration of wealth and whether this can be government or philanthropists and whether that's the right model. But the reality is, we're saving people from malaria. We're solving people from dysentery, and that's pretty exciting.
And our kids don't have to suffer from 50 diseases that they used to have all the time that wiped out half the population every day.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see kids with casts on their arm anymore. Like people they don't even break their arms. They have helmets. Like we didn't have helmets. I'm Gen X, which is the best generation for the record.
Of course.
We were latchkey kids. We drank from the hose. We had to prepare our own meals, all those type of things. And I think, look, there's some real discussions about mental laziness that are created by some of these tools and relying on them. And I can look at it myself, how much I rely on maps and how that affects, people's sense of direction. But, there's just, everything's better. Almost everything's better. Like it's just easy to be caught in all the negativity of the day.
It is. And that's positive notes. Good to end this on. I think that as humanity, we've solved a lot of problems that if you had been back 100, even 200 years ago, who could imagine that we would have these solutions in place? Who could imagine? Nobody, not a single science fiction author imagined the internet or the mobile phone being ubiquitous like it is. Yeah, Dick Tracy had a little TV on his thing, but not everybody had a supercomputer, literal supercomputer in their hand. I mean, it's a supercomputer, better than the old craze used to be. Imagine when quantum comes out and becomes common. Oh my God.
Yeah. Now you've got the smartest person in the world in your pocket, available to answer any question, to analyze your health records, to your point, to help you create a plan for self-betterment, to help you create a better business, better marketing plan, to update your website, to help you in hiring, all those things. And what a wonderful world that is.
It is a wonderful world, and it's nothing to be afraid of. It might be something to be cautious about, to make proper decisions. I mean, I'm certainly not going to use AI, for example, to write for me for my clients. That would be silly. That's not what they're paying me for. But I'm going to use it to help. I just had a client there where I have over 100 interviews. Do you know how much work that would be to put together by hand? I just told AI, okay, can you just put this together in some semblance of order? And it did. And it took it like 30 minutes to chug through it all, but that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And in prepping for interviews like this, read all the content about Richard Lowe and give me a set of questions that would be interesting that haven't been asked in any previous interviews. And it'll do it because it knows everything. So we just got to figure out, how to harness these things, to think about that first. If I knew the smartest person in the world who knew everything that's ever happened with relation to this topic, what would I ask them? And if you start with that mentality first, it's amazing what you'll get out of these tools.
It's true. Well, that's a great note to end this on. Any final words?
No, I think this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you having me on. I think, continue being an optimist.
Yep. Well, thank you for appearing on the show. This has been the Leaders and Their Stories podcast. I'm Richard Lowe, the writing king and ghostwriting guru. Thank you very much for coming.